Hi, my name is Jose Espinal. I'm an assistant director for finance at Ernst& Young, and I will be doing this morning's presentation. The focus of this presentation is really to go over ways to help you pay for your education after high school. Just so you know, your teacher has a copy of this presentation that he or she can share with you afterwards so that you have all the important details for yourselves and for your family. So before I get started on the presentation, I just wanted to introduce myself and give you a bit of background of essentially where I come from and where I have been and how I got to where I'm at right now. So I attended an international affairs high school in Philadelphia. Grew up in a very poor area of Philadelphia. Um, and I was fortunate enough to get into the high school that I got into. I had to apply for it. From there, I went to Penn State and I did an undergraduate degree in business management. I was lucky in the sense that I applied for tons of scholarships and I was able to get a full ride scholarship there. Um, as I mentioned before, I am a finance assistant director at Ernst& Young. I did not major in finance, but I realized after graduating college, while I did take some finance courses during my undergraduate degree, that I really enjoyed working with numbers. And then after my first year or so after graduating from college, I made sure that that was a trajectory that I wanted to go with. And since then, I've always been doing finance type roles, and I really enjoy the number side of the world. So that's what I've been doing the past 13, 14 years. So moving on, just want to cover some of the today's objectives. We really want to help you get a good understanding of the FAFSA form and why it's important, ensuring that you understand the tax information that you need, along with some of the benefits of having financial aid, and keeping in mind the importance of reducing your student debt, and also some deadlines that are critical in the next couple months for you as you begin this process. So quickly, today's agenda is really just an introduction. And then a post-secondary education really just comes down to essentially an education after you graduate from college. I'll cover some of the costs of attending college, several ways to pay for it, and a quick knowledge check as well. So let's talk, what are your plans after high school? I know a lot of you are probably thinking different things that you want to do with your life. So if you really want to get an education, you have multiple options. You could do a 2-year program, of course, your 4-year college degree, which is typical, attending a technical or trade school, or just even pursuing a military career. It all really comes down what you want to do and what you see yourself doing, which I think is really important. There are a lot of options out there. So now it's a time for you to consider what you want to do after high school. Perhaps this presentation will give you some insight into the different options at different value points and things to consider. So as I mentioned before, really what's post-secondary education is really any type of degree you pursue after high school. Some could be a technical school, a state school, university, certifications, even 1-year degree or 2-year degrees, which are typical for associate's degrees, and then 4-year degrees, which is a bachelor's degree, which is what I went for at Penn State. And since then, I did go and do my master's degree as well. So now let's talk about education and income. This chart here is really good at showing you the comparison, essentially, of your potential income if you are to get a degree. As you can see all the way to the left here, if you have less than ninth grade, your income will probably be around $26,000. Of course, as you continue on with like a college degree, for example, if you have a bachelor's degree, you're looking at 91,000. A master's degree, you're looking at 108,000. And of course, if you have a doctorate or a professional degree, you're looking 104,000 onwards. So this illustrates the importance really of why it's critical to get an education after high school. The next section of the presentation focuses on how you can expect to pay for college and how much college is, which has gotten quite pricey these days. So the next section of today's presentation really focuses on how you could expect to pay for college, which is really critical. So it really comes down to two types of costs, school costs and survival costs. So school costs comes down to, of course, your tuition, your living arrangements, if you're living on campus or off campus. I know a lot of my friends, when I was an undergraduate, I lived off campus. I lived on campus. I'd rather live on campus just because I wanted to be close to everything and I could just get up and go to class. Textbooks, of course, any technology fees. So there are technology fees if you're using the computer labs on campus, athletics, if you're participating in any sports or the gym, and then of course your typical school supplies. And then your survival cost comes to off-campus living. If you're living off campus, any type of transportation to get to and from class. If you do have a car, which a lot of schools typically don't allow you to have a car your first year, but onwards you can. You'll have to pay for car insurance. If you have a cell phone, any type of entertainment, and of course, any type of healthcare or health services that you may need. So this table really does a great job of showing essentially the breakdown of costs of some of the schools here in Florida. So as you can see here on the column that I'm kind of highlighting, the tuition and fees um, for a full year. So on average, a semester is about $3,000. This column also under books and supplies also shows you the breakdown of books and supplies and costs. So again, and these are just average costs, something to keep in mind. It all depends on the major that you choose to study. For example, if you go for a medical degree or any type of medical or science degree, of course, your textbooks are going to be higher in terms of cost. For me, I studied, as I said, business. So some of the semesters, just one semester alone, I would spend $800, even $900, depending on the textbooks the professor selected for the course. And then as you can see under room and board is truly your most expensive cost. So it's more expensive than your books and supplies and more expensive than your tuition because it really covers typically your housing and then your meals as well. And then transportation, this is just an estimate as well. Depending, again, if you live on campus, you really don't have to worry about transportation, but if you live off campus, you do. And then other expenses as well, you could see here. And then the final column under total gives you essentially an estimate for the year, how much it is to go to college in some of these institutions here in Florida. That being said, I think these are pretty affordable. When I went to Penn State and I was in state, so I was paying in-state tuition, my room and board and tuition was coming to around 45,000 per year. So it was pretty expensive. Just so you know, depending on the school, private colleges and universities are 2 to 3 times as more than state schools, than your typical state school in terms of tuition and room and board.
So just to talk a little bit more, what are the costs and fees associated with education? So there are 2-year college programs out there. A lot of students, even some of my old friends from high school, decided to go the 2-year route at a state college and then transferring to a 4-year university just because it was cheaper. So this table shows a good understanding of the tuition of some of the schools in Florida. For example, Broward College, Gulf Coast State College, Santa Fe College, and College of Central Florida, and then Valencia College. So this gives us a good breakdown here of the tuition. So as you can see, Broward College is very affordable for in-state, and then depending where you live or where you essentially, if you wanted to stay within Florida but go to another city, you could, as you can see here in Valencia College, the tuition is almost $2,000 for in-state. So as I mentioned, Valencia College, looking at these are pretty good tuition rates. They are in the Orlando area. The average cost here for Florida is almost $4,000, but Valencia College is about $2,500 for in-state. So if you're in-state, of course, that's always the case. Your tuition is much lower. And the good thing about Valencia College is that it is about $103 per credit hour. So if you're depending on the number of credits you take, which typically the average is about 15 credits, you're probably looking around $1,500 a semester, which is pretty decent. Again, compared to some of the other schools and compared to some of the private institutions out there as well. So you probably wonder, well, how I'm going to pay for college. So the next section of the presentation really focuses on that and how you can expect to pay for college and ways you can pay for college. So paying for post-secondary education can be a major financial challenge, and in some cases, it can affect the rest of your life or years or after you graduate from college. That being said, it's still very important to get a college degree. It's worth it. Your income potential is much higher. The key is to invest wisely and keep in mind how you can avoid debt and be a little bit strategic. So that's what I'm going to be covering in the next couple of slides, and I'm going to give you a couple examples. So ways to paying for college, you could, based on any savings that you have in an interest account, you could also do a 529 account, which really you pay for, essentially you could pay for tuition without any penalties if you withdraw from that account for funds, which you could deduct if you're working part-time. That being said, when I was in Penn State, I did not have a 529 savings plan, but I did work. And one of the slides here we'll talk about briefly is a work study program. A lot of the schools have that where you could work for the school between 15 and in some cases up to 20 hours, and you get paid. And that could be money you could use to pay for your tuition, room and board, and if you have scholarship, you could just use that for savings as well. So really ways to pay for financial aid. There's a couple here that I want to touch base on here. So there's the Florida Bright Future Scholarship that doesn't have to be repaid. There are federal grants, of course, that the schools can grant you. That also does not need to be repaid. There are scholarships that also don't need to be repaid. So the key is to look at what scholarships are out there, which typically require essays. For example, when I was in Philly and I was applying for college, I think I ended up applying to about 20 scholarships. So I got the full ride, and then I had a couple more that really helped me with any extra expenses that I had. In some cases, some of them will just give you a blank check that you could have and put into your savings account. Another way to pay for college as well, as I mentioned, you could do the federal work study program where you get paid an hourly rate depending on the hours that you work. And typically, this is when you're working in an office on campus. And then, of course, student loans, which do need to be repaid. And definitely can be a challenge because you do have to pay interest rates on those. And I'll cover that as well briefly here. So briefly, we're going to show you a video here that talks a little bit about FAFSA and some of the deadlines and things to keep in mind.
If you're interested in financial aid for college or career school, you're going to need to fill out the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. It takes most people about 30 minutes to complete online, and the best part, it's 100% free, and it provides you with access to grants, loans, and work-study funds from the federal government. And many colleges and states use FAFSA information. If you're interested in financial aid for college or career school, you're going to need to fill out the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. If you're interested in financial aid for college or career school, you're going to need to fill out the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA. It takes most people about 30 minutes to complete online, and the best part, it's 100% free, and it provides you with access to grants, loans, and work-study funds from the federal government. And many colleges and states use FAFSA information to provide their own college or state financial aid. Before you fill out the FAFSA, it's a good idea to create your FSA ID, a username and password that lets you electronically sign your FAFSA and gives you access to various websites related to federal student aid. And here's an important tip. If your parent is providing information on your FAFSA, he or she will need his or her own FSA ID. Visit studentaid.gov/FSA ID for more information. Your FAFSA can be completed online at fafsa.gov, and help is provided throughout the online application process. You will need to fill out the FAFSA each year you are in school because your financial situation may change. Plus, you may be able to automatically transfer your tax data from the IRS, making the application even quicker to fill out. Each state and college or career school sets its own deadline for the FAFSA, so it's best to get it done early. Since some of the funds are available on a first-come, first-served basis, you don't want to miss out. Now that you know about the FAFSA, you might be asking, well, how much money will I get? Your college or career school will do the math, and there's a simple formula that they use. First, the college takes your cost of attendance, which is the total amount it will cost you to go to that school. Your cost of attendance will vary from school to school. Then, the college subtracts your expected family contribution, or EFC. Your EFC is based on information provided in your FAFSA and will not change based on the school you attend. However, the EFC is not necessarily the amount of money you will have to pay. Basically, your cost of attendance minus your EFC equals your financial need. Your college uses your financial need and other information to determine how much financial aid you can receive. See? Pretty simple. If you have questions or need more information, please visit studentaid.gov.
So looking at a little bit more detail in terms of the FAFSA form, what is needed? In a lot of cases, there's a lot of information that you have to have ready, essentially, when you're ready to fill the form out. And believe it or not, the form actually is not as bad as it used to be. I remember when when I was an undergrad, it was a lot of information that I had to fill out. Not anymore. And the reason I know that is because I applied for financial aid myself when I did my master's degree a couple of years ago. But the first item that you should keep in mind that you should have ready is the school that you plan to apply. Because what happens is once you fill this form out, your FAFSA details get sent to them, and that's how they determine the financial aid or what you qualify for. You should also have your social security number ready and any tax documentation. So any tax returns for yourself and for your parents, they do require both. So now just to briefly touch here, a little bit more detail on scholarships. And the more scholarships you have, the less likely you have to take out student loans. Some of the most common types of scholarships are academic record, first-time college students, volunteer efforts, legacy heritage, and athletic promise. So this gives you a little bit more detail. So for example, in terms of academic record, there's the National Merit Scholarships, first-time college students, there's the Dell Scholars, volunteer efforts like the Harry Truman Scholarship Foundation, Legacy Heritage is the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, and Athletic Promise such as the Foot Locker Scholarship Athletes. There's more Florida scholarship opportunities that you could look under the Office of Student Financial Aid. That should give you tons more options in application details and deadlines there as well. And then now let's talk a little bit about loans. As I mentioned, I've had both types of loans before, subsidized and unsubsidized. Loans are money you have to repay back with interest, and some you pay interest while you're in college, and others you pay interest after you graduate. So from my perspective, I had the subsidized loan when I was at Penn State, and I did mention that I had a full ride scholarship, but it was to have a roommate. So I took out a loan so that I could live alone. There was a dorm where you had your own room and your own bathroom, so I figured that would be more conducive for me so I could focus more on my studies. So in that perspective, the maximum of that loan is $5,500, and you begin payment after 6 months after graduation. And then on the other side, you have the unsubsidized loan, which you could get a loan up to $20,500, which is what I took to do my master's degree. Those you begin payment after you graduate from college 6 months after, but you have to pay for interest while you are in school. So, and that you could pay for it, but can we go back, Amanda? I butchered this one. Sorry.
No worries. Absolutely. We're all set when you are.
All right, I'm ready. So now let's talk about loans and the ways you can borrow for education and how to pay for interest. There's two types. There's the direct subsidized and direct unsubsidized. So I've had both. So the direct subsidized I had when I was doing my undergraduate degree at Penn State, and it was because I wanted to live by myself in a dorm where it was all single, so you did not have a roommate. So in that one, the maximum for subsidized loans is $5,500. You could be, even if it's just a part-time student, you're still eligible for it, or if you're full-time, of course, you're eligible for it as well. Both types of these loans, you begin repayment after 6 months after graduating from college. The good thing about the subsidized loan, and I really push it, any of you do have to get loans to try to get a subsidized loan, is that there is no interest accrual while you are in college. Unlike the unsubsidized, the interest does accrue. So as you're, if it's, let's say, a 4-year, that interest continues to accrue throughout those 4 years. Right now, rates have decreased, of course, because of COVID. And as of March, it looks like the rates were around 2.75% for interest rates on both of these loans. And something to keep in mind is also private loans, which could really be a killer because their interest rates are much higher than the subsidized and unsubsidized loans that are out there. So just talking a little bit more about student loans here. Parents parent debt has actually increased over the years. A lot of parents have been taking out loans to help their kids go to college. That being said, the average annual tuition and fees at an in-state four-year college is about $10,000. And as I mentioned earlier, if you go out of state for college, your average 4 years around 26,000. And if you were to attend a private nonprofit four-year college, you're looking around $35,000. So there are some additional incentives available for individual colleges to account for changes in student aid because of COVID. I know attending college during COVID has been challenging and has presented challenges for some people. In cases that in-person college is not available, colleges have been able to convert federal funds for work study and grants for individual students, which has been a major help. There's been a lot of schools that have had to go virtual the past year. The last couple of months, a lot of them have gone back to in-class, in-person sessions. So the good thing in Florida, there is the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, which is for colleges and universities to determine how they should prioritize emergency grants for students. So to be eligible for this emergency grant, you're not required to be eligible for financial aid. You don't have to file a FAFSA or qualify for a Pell Grant or attending specific courses or be enrolled in a specific program, which is great. So now it's time for a knowledge check. I'm going to read the question here, and I'll give you some time to essentially discuss this question. So true or false, there's a direct correlation between earning a post-secondary degree and a potential wage earnings. So there's this statistical data that indicates, of course, as I mentioned in one of the charts, that there is a positive correlation between earning a higher degree and higher earnings potential. So it is true that if you go for a post-secondary degree, your potential for wage earnings are much higher. So the next knowledge check is around financial aid and which ones do not need to be repaid. So which of the following types of financial aid do not need to be repaid? Grants, Florida Bright Future Scholarship, Federal Loan Program, and Federal Work Studies Program. So as I mentioned before, federal loans do need to be repaid. Grants, scholarships, and work studies program do not need to be repaid. So from that perspective, based on this knowledge check, only the federal loan has to be repaid. So the next question, which of the following is the most expensive cost associated with going to college in Florida? Tuition and fees, room and board, or transportation? So in Florida, room and board is the most expensive. So it's way more expensive than your tuition and fees, and of course your transportation. So just some key takeaways for you to keep in mind. FAFSA is the first step to ensuring you secure financial aid. You will need to have tax documentation ready for yourself and for your parents. There's various types of financial aid available to you. Some have to be repaid, others not. Student loans can be risky, so it's important to take into account which type of student loan to take out. And then also, of course, ensuring that you're aware of the critical deadlines for scholarship applications and financial aid. Thank you so much for attending today's session. Really hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully this will give you some clarity and assistance as you discuss with your family your plans for financial aid and, of course, for applying for college.